At 66, Ricky Pierce is finally opening up about one of the NBA's most explosive incidents. The words, "I will kill you," echoed through a locker room in 1994, and guns were allegedly in gym bags. Coach George Karl later revealed that players told him weapons were present in the facility, with death threats including, "I'll kill your family," being exchanged between teammates. This wasn't just trash talk. This was a moment that could have ended careers and lives. But here's what nobody talks about. Ricky Pierce, the veteran at the center of this storm, has always maintained he was the voice of reason in a situation that spiraled out of control. And after all these years, his side of the story reveals the truth about leadership, loyalty, and what happens when a coach chooses sides instead of solving problems. The 1993-94 Seattle Supersonics were supposed to be champions. They dominated the regular season with an NBA-leading 63 victories, securing the #1 seed in the Western Conference. With Michael Jordan suddenly retired, the league had a vacuum at the top, and Seattle was perfectly positioned to fill it. This wasn't just a good team. This was an elite roster built for immortality. Gary Payton anchored the defense, earning All-Star honors, All-NBA third team, and All-Defensive first team select. Shawn Kemp finished 7th in MVP voting and made the All-NBA second team. And then there was Ricky Pierce, the highly efficient veteran scorer who provided crucial scoring punch off the bench. The talent was undeniable. The championship window was wide open. But beneath the surface of those 63 wins, something was broken. Postseason analysis would later describe this team as head weak and splintering internally. The dysfunction wasn't new. It had been simmering all season long. Coach George Karl's management style tolerated extreme emotional outbursts because he believed Gary Payton's volatile nature contained a good fire that fueled competitiveness. But that same tolerance created an environment where conflicts festered instead of being resolved. Pierce, a respected veteran with years of experience, found himself watching the team's young star dominate possessions without regard for efficient basketball. The tension between old-school veterans and the new generation wasn't unique to Seattle, but here it was allowed to grow unchecked. This created a powder keg situation where any spark could ignite a massive explosion that would consume everything the team had built. Before we go any further, if you're finding this story as fascinating as we are, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below. What do you think matters more in championship teams? Raw talent or veteran wisdom? Let us know your thoughts because this story proves that question isn't as simple as it seems. And stick around because what happens next changed NBA history forever. The explosion came during halftime of Game 2 in the 1994 Western Conference first round against the Denver Nuggets. Seattle had won Game 1 and was still controlling the series, which makes what happened next even more revealing. This wasn't a fight born from losing. This was internal pressure finally breaking through. Ricky Pierce and Gary Payton got into a heated argument that quickly escalated beyond anything a basketball disagreement should ever become. But here's where the narratives diverge, and Pierce's version deserves attention. According to Pierce, the dispute was about basketball fundamentals. He told Payton he was taking too many shots and needed to pass the ball more. This wasn't disrespect. This was a veteran trying to guide a young star toward winning basketball. Pierce saw inefficiency and spoke up about it, which is exactly what veteran leaders are supposed to do. Gary Payton saw it differently. He felt Pierce was talking to him as if he was a little kid, showing a lack of respect for his status as the team's franchise player. The conflict escalated horrifically, with threats exchanged that crossed every professional line imaginable. Coach Karl later confirmed the severity, stating that death threats were made and that players informed him guns were allegedly in gym bags at the facility. Gary Payton himself would confirm years later that gun threats were exchanged during the confrontation. This was no longer about basketball. This was a complete breakdown of professional boundaries. But here's what Ricky Pierce has consistently maintained. The incident was blown way out of proportion. He characterized it as a little argument that competitive teams experience regularly. Pierce argued that cussing and closed-door confrontations were a part of hard-nosed basketball, expressions of the competitive fire necessary to win championships. Was this minimization? Perhaps. But it's also possible that Pierce, as the elder statesman, understood that competitive environments generate heat, and his crime was speaking a hard truth that a young superstar didn't want to hear. His perspective frames him not as an instigator, but as someone trying to restore team-first basketball in an environment that had become too focused on individual dominance. The fact that Pierce continued to emphasize the tactical nature of his criticism, even into Game 3 of the series, shows his commitment to what he believed was right for the team's success. What happened next revealed everything about the organization's priorities. Coach George Karl made a choice. He sidelined Ricky Pierce and kept Gary Payton at the center of everything. From a business perspective, it made sense. Peyton was the franchise's future, while Pierce was a veteran role player approaching the end of his prime. But Pierce's criticism of how Karl handled the situation cuts deep. The coach never spoke to him about the benching or the fight itself. Not one word. Karl simply erased Pierce from the rotation without explanation or confrontation, sending a clear message to everyone in that locker room. Loyalty to the star player mattered more than veteran input, more than tactical needs, more than team unity. This silent treatment was perhaps more damaging than any confrontation could have been, because it left questions unanswered and wounds unhealed. The passive approach meant Pierce never had the opportunity to defend his position or help the team move forward constructively. The statistical impact was devastating. Before the altercation, Pierce averaged 20 minutes and 12.5 points across games 1 and 2. He was a vital offensive weapon. After Karl's decision, Pierce's playing time was slashed by 45%, dropping to just 11 minutes per game in the decisive games 3, 4, and 5. His scoring fell 60% to only 5 points per contest. The team lost all 3 of those games and was eliminated by the 8th-seeded Denver Nuggets in one of the biggest upsets in NBA history. Pierce's absence removed exactly the kind of efficient perimeter scoring Seattle needed to counter Denver's defensive scheme. The numbers don't lie. When Pierce was on the court contributing meaningful minutes, Seattle was winning. When he was marginalized and his role diminished, they collapsed under the pressure of Denver's defensive intensity. The Nuggets, led by Dikembe Mutombo's defensive dominance, had built their strategy around protecting the paint and overplaying the perimeter. Mutombo averaged more blocks per game than the entire Supersonics team combined. Shawn Kemp, normally an explosive force, was neutralized. The Sonics' offense became predictable and stagnant, unable to adjust to Denver's length and athleticism. 2 of Denver's 3 victories came in overtime, revealing a team that couldn't execute under pressure or maintain composure in critical moments. This is the signature of internal fracture. Teams that trust each other close out tight games. Teams divided by unresolved conflict collapse when it matters most. The series was still played in the old best-of-5 format, which meant there was less room for error and less time to recover from momentum swings or internal disruptions. Ricky Pierce has never wavered in his assessment. George Karl cowered out and benched me, and that decision cost us that series. This isn't bitterness. This is a veteran who understands basketball, recognizing a leadership failure. By refusing to confront the underlying issues, by choosing not to address Peyton's shot selection or ego, by never even speaking to Pierce about the situation, Karl created an institutional vacuum where trust died. The rest of the roster understood the message. Hierarchy wasn't based on merit, efficiency, or what gave the team the best chance to win. It was based on star power and organizational politics. That's a recipe for psychological fragility in high-pressure situations. Consider what Pierce was arguing for: better ball movement, more efficient shot selection, team-first basketball. These aren't selfish demands. These are the principles that win championships. Pierce wasn't asking for more shots for himself. He was asking Peyton to trust his teammates and play within a system. When that request was met with fury and when management sided entirely with the player being critiqued, it sent a message that individual dominance mattered more than team success. The benching of Pierce wasn't just a personnel decision. It was the death of veteran leadership influence in that locker room. The younger players watched and learned that speaking up meant being cast aside, creating a culture of silence that prevented honest evaluation and growth. The 1994 upset changed NBA history forever. The Denver Nuggets became the first 8th seed ever to eliminate a number 1 seed, establishing a precedent that shattered assumptions about playoff invincibility. Adding insult to injury, the Nuggets had discovered before Game 3 that the Sonics had already checked out of their Denver hotel, fully expecting to sweep the series. This act of perceived arrogance became a powerful rallying cry for the underdog Nuggets, giving them massive psychological fuel while Seattle was consumed by internal turmoil. But the deeper legacy is organizational. The Supersonics never recovered from this internal explosion. Bob Whitsitt, the team president and general manager who had been the glue who had held it all together, left shortly after the series. Shawn Kemp's contract disputes festered, eventually leading to the core's dissolution. The championship window that seemed so wide open slammed shut, and the franchise spent the rest of the decade trying to recapture what had been lost in that halftime locker room. If you've made it this far, you're clearly invested in understanding the real story behind the headlines. Do us a favor and hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed, because we bring you these deep dives every week. Share your thoughts in the comments about whether coaches should prioritize franchise stars or team chemistry when conflict erupts. Ricky Pierce emerges from this story not as a villain, but as a principled veteran who understood what winning required and had the courage to say it. His crime was speaking truth to power in an organization that had decided power mattered more than truth. The weapons, the threats, the violence of that moment should never be minimized, but Pierce's core message deserves recognition. He wanted better basketball. He wanted team success. And when management chose sides instead of addressing the real issues, the championship dream died. At 66, Ricky Pierce has confirmed what many suspected. The 1994 collapse wasn't about talent or matchups. It was about leadership failure, organizational cowardice, and what happens when veterans are silenced instead of heard. His legacy deserves better than being remembered only for one terrible moment. He was an efficient scorer, a respected veteran, and someone who cared enough about winning to risk his role by demanding better. That's not a villain. That's a leader who stood firm on principle even when it cost him everything.